Good morning, everybody. We're capping off the first 100-day week with our morning briefing. How does everybody feel?
Just a couple years ago, there were two gentlemen. They were from Venezuela. They were members of Tren de Aragua. The Biden administration and Border Patrol apprehended them and made the decision to provide them with extensive due process, put them onto a program known as supervised release, and put them on ankle monitors so that they could go through a lengthy legal, judicial determination as to whether these legal aliens who had just set foot on U.S. soil might want to live in the United States for the rest of their lives. What was the result of that decision? What was the result of that choice that was made? Those two men kidnapped a young girl named Jocelyn Ungary from her family. They beat her, they sexually assaulted her, they tortured her, they stripped her, they murdered her, and they dumped her body. That is what the Biden administration's policy was. Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Tren de Aragua, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors, and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded our homes and our country.
Awesome. Thank you. Peter, we'll take a couple more questions.
When a citizen goes to, say, a hospital in a medical emergency, they don't care what race or sex their doctor or their nurse is. They want the best treatment they can get in that emergency. When they're flying a plane or when they're on an aircraft, they want that pilot to be the best pilot, the safest pilot, not caring what that pilot's race or sex is. This applies across the whole government. In particular, looking at our university system, this administration has opened investigations into universities across the country for violating, we talk a lot about Supreme Court rulings, universities across this country are in plain and direct violation of the Supreme Court's ruling that affirmative action, as in racial quotas and set-asides, are illegal. Students must be admitted to universities on a color-blind basis. But we have demonstrated through clear evidence that our university system, including our medical schools, and perhaps particularly our medical schools.
Stephen, what is the end goal of the China tariffs right now? Is the idea to open up the Chinese markets through a deal to a better market for exporting American goods to China, or is it a reconfiguration of global trade in a way that isolates China from free countries?
No. So China is a unique situation, obviously. The president has talked at length about what happened to us economically since China's entrance into the World Trade Organization and the trillions and trillions of dollars of trade deficits that we've racked up with China over the period of that time, and what that's meant for our national security, what that's meant for our economic security, what that's meant for our supply chains. Obviously, right now, the Secretary of the Treasury is in the process of developing a plan that will answer the questions that you're talking about, but the president's goals have been very clear on these points, which is that he is not going to allow China to continue to steal our intellectual property, to continue to illegally dump and subsidize their goods in our markets, to manipulate their currency, to rack up an unsustainable trade deficit. We need to have a trade relationship with China that does not do harm to our nation's economic and national security. And that has to be the guidepost of any objective. At the same time, tariffs will bring significant revenue into this country that will allow us to pursue our dramatic plan of tax cuts and reforms.
President Trump stood up for the Constitution's promise of colorblind equality before the law, so he terminated radical DEI preferencing and federal contracting and directed federal agencies to relentlessly combat private sector discrimination. DEI seeks to divide and pit Americans against each other based on immutable characteristics. President Trump put an end to it. In President Trump's America, individual dignity, hard work, and excellence are the only things that will determine if you get ahead. we secured a historic agreement to establish the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This is a first-of-its-kind economic partnership for the reconstruction and long-term economic success of Ukraine that the United States will greatly benefit from. This partnership represents the United States taking an economic stake in securing a free, peaceful, and sovereign future for Ukraine. This partnership establishes a fund that will receive 50% of royalties, license fees, and other similar payments from natural resource projects in Ukraine. And President Trump knows that America's children are our future, and he'll never stop fighting for them. That's why he ended the radical, un-American indoctrination of children by eliminating support for divisive, radical gender ideology and equity ideology, and why the president protected parents' fundamental rights. And lastly, the president believes in fundamental biology. Isn't that something? Which is why he made it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two sexes, male and female. And because men and women are biologically different, President Trump ended the unfair, demeaning practice of forcing women to compete against men in sports and having their private spaces invaded. When President Trump promised a complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense, he meant it. And over the next 100 days, get ready for historic trade deals, budget deals, and peace deals.
Last night, Kamala Harris delivered her first major speech after losing the election. She attacked Trump personally, attacked the policies. Any comment from the White House on that?
Well, I think it was a great reminder to the American people of just how blessed we all are that the leader sitting in the Oval Office today is President Donald Trump and not President Kamala Harris. It was a helpful reminder of just what a travesty and a tragedy that would have been. It would have been the end of America. And it gives me a chance to bring this whole thing home. If we continued on this road of radical regulation, choking off American energy, sending our supply chains to foreign countries, taxing our economy to death, pushing this cancerous woke ideology on our children, ending merit, ending scientific innovation, ending public safety, allowing, everyone goes to the stores these days, everything's locked up, criminals roam free, law-abiding citizens under the previous administration were punished while gangbangers were given red carpet treatment. Democrats, of course, are still giving gangbangers red carpet treatment. And then the border invasion. If those policies had continued, it would have been the end of the American Republic. And the only thing Americans want to hear from Kamala Harris is an apology for joining Joe Biden, and remember, she was the border czar, joining Joe Biden in aiding and abetting the invasion of our country. And we're never going to stop talking about this, because what they did to this country is unforgivable. It is an eternal stain on the Democrat Party. Every day we read another story. Every day we arrest another alien they let into this country who raped a child, who beat a woman within an inch of her life, who murdered a mom, who murdered a dad, who trafficked drugs into this country, who trafficked fentanyl into this country, who are responsible for dead and slaughtered Americans. And I don't know what's broken in the Washington press corps, that none of that moves them emotionally. The only thing that gets them exercised is, do we need to have more trials for terrorist supporters? We need to have more trials for gangbangers. We need to have more trials for illegal alien invaders, even though Congress and the Constitution clearly say that you can expel invaders and illegal aliens quickly, efficiently, and properly. This president has literally saved America, and I could not be prouder. I could not be prouder, as I know Caroline feels the same way, to come every single day to this building where we have a leader sitting in that office whose first, last, and every thought is the safety, prosperity, security, and sovereignty of the citizens. That's an important word, people. Citizens of this republic. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. And just to add on the Kamala Harris point, I think I speak for everyone at the White House. We encourage Kamala Harris to continue going out and do speaking engagements. You'll hear from the president at 11 o'clock. See you guys later.
A report the president's planning to fire Mike Waltz because of a response. Why haven't you nominated a single judge?